lost my best buddy during war. He and I served together in the military, went through thick and thin. We were like brothers, but war does some messed up things to people, and it took him from me. The only solace I had was visiting his grave. One evening, I decided to pay him a visit at the cemetery. I grabbed a bottle of his favorite whiskey and 2 glasses, just like old times. I figured I'd have a drink with him, keep his memory alive. So, I was sitting by his grave, reminiscing about our adventures. Time flew by, and it got darker. The cemetery was eerily quiet, except for the faint rustling of leaves in the wind. I finished 1 glass and poured another. It was almost as if I could feel his presence, like he was there with me sharing that drink. It began to rain, not heavily, but tiny drops. I figured I could take another glass with him. But then things took a turn. In the corner of my eyes, I saw a flash, followed by a big thunder. It began to rain even more, and I figured I should head home. Just as I was about to leave, I noticed a figure entering the cemetery. The only light was coming from the distant street lamps and the lightning. This person didn't see me sitting there. They were focused on something else entirely. As they got closer, I could make out that they were carrying some tools, like a shovel and a pickaxe. My curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to stay hidden, watching them from behind a nearby tree. The stranger reached a spot in the cemetery and started to dig. The sound of the shovel hitting the earth echoed through the silent night. At first, I thought maybe they were just planting some flowers or something like that. But the way they were digging seemed off. The person dug way too long for the hole to be small enough for flowers. I watched as they dug deeper and deeper into the ground, their movements deliberate and determined. I couldn't see their face, but I could tell they were focused. My heart raced as I tried to make sense of what was happening. Why would someone be digging a hole in a cemetery in the dead of night? As the hole got deeper, I couldn't contain my curiosity any longer. I needed to know what was going on. I quietly made my way closer to the digger, keeping to the shadows. The chilling air seemed to grow even colder as I approached. And then, just as I was within a few feet of the stranger, something happened that sent a shiver down my spine. A lightning peeked through the clouds, revealing the face of the person digging. I didn't recognize the face at all, but what I did notice was that the grave the man was digging in was the father of my dead friend. He was placed just a few graves down the line from my friend. My mind raced, trying to comprehend the impossible. Who could be here digging in that grave, and what the hell was his purpose? It was as if time had twisted and bent around itself. I watched in disbelief as he continued to dig, seemingly unaware of my presence. Fear washed over me and I couldn't move. I wanted to call out to him, to ask what was happening, but my voice failed me. I gathered up the courage and yelled, "What the hell are you doing?" The man dropped the tools and ran without even looking who was talking to him. He just took off. I have a friend who is a cop. I called him up and he came to the cemetery. He called in the incident. Good thing that the man left his tools. Passing through the cemetery allowed me and my buddy, let's call him Mike, to get home faster. We had been hanging out at our friend Sarah's place. She'd invited us over for dinner, and it sounded like a good plan, especially since we hadn't seen each other in a while. So we had a great time at Sarah's, eating delicious food, catching up, and just generally having a blast. The evening went by quickly, and before we knew it, it was getting pretty late. Mike and I both had to get up early the next day, so we decided it was time to head home. Sarah's place was on the outskirts of town, and we both lived in the same general direction, so we usually walked home together when we hung out there. It was a bit of a hike, but we didn't usually mind. It was a chance to chat and catch up. We were a bit tired this night, so we went ahead and passed through this old church and cemetery. It was a place we'd walked past countless times before, but never at this time of the night. It had never been anything out of the ordinary. As we got closer to the church, we began to hear faint music coming from inside. It was odd because the church was usually deserted at that time of night. We could see the soft glow of candles through the stained glass windows, flickering with the rhythm of the music. We looked at each other, both of us intrigued and a bit uneasy. We'd never heard music coming from the church before, and it didn't seem like the type of place that hosted late-night gatherings. We got curious and we decided to take a closer look. We approached the church slowly, trying to be as inconspicuous as possible. The music was growing louder now, and it had an eerie, otherworldly quality to it. We reached the church doors and peered inside through the small leaded windows. What we saw inside made our blood run cold. The church was filled with people, all dressed in dark robes, standing side by side in front of the altar. They were chanting in a language we couldn't understand, and the candles cast long, flickering shadows on the walls. It looked like some kind of cult ritual. I could feel the hair on the back of my neck stand on end as I watched in disbelief. I had recently watched a documentary on people getting born into a cult, so seeing what looked like a cult was terrifying. Mike and I exchanged terrified glances, realizing we'd stumbled upon something we weren't supposed to see. We knew we needed to get out of there, but we had found a spot in the back of the church from where we could see everything while being well hidden. A part of the reason we stayed to keep lurking was the fact of what we now have witnessed, and we were afraid of getting caught on the way out. So we were contemplating if we should get out or stay. There was just one problem. We didn't think about the fact that our voices would create echoes bouncing from the walls and ceiling of the church. As we started whispering to each other, their chanting suddenly stopped. We didn't dare to raise our heads above the pews in fear of getting seen. We kept our heads down, but we could hear footsteps walking down the aisle. We knew what we had to do, so we got up and bolted towards the exit. As we turned to leave, the church doors creaked open. A cold gust of wind rushed out, and we froze in our tracks. Out of the darkness emerged one of those figures. He wore a hooded robe that concealed his face, and in his hand he held a staff adorned with strange symbols. Mike was running in front of me, and thank God for that. Without hesitation, he pushed the man out of his way so we had a clear passage through the door and could get out. We ran like our lives depended on it, not looking back until we were safely back in our neighborhood. When we finally stopped, we were out of breath and trembling with fear. This has probably been the scariest moment I have ever experienced in my life. I used to work at a cemetery. It was a typical job digging graves, maintaining the grounds, nothing too out of the ordinary. I was out in the cemetery just getting ready to dig a grave for someone who was supposed to be laid to rest the following week. My co-worker Dave was helping me, and we had been working together for years. We started digging. We'd been at it for a few hours when Dave paused, wiping sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand. Our shift ended, and we had done a good job that day. We made it pretty far digging that hole. The next day, we had to continue our task and finish up digging the hole. I went to the shed to gather our tools, and Dave walked towards the grave. As I got close to Dave, he looked at me with a strange expression, one I can't quite describe. Fear, maybe? He muttered something I couldn't understand. When I finally reached the grave, I got confused. The hole we had dug was no longer there. It had been filled back up. After some chatting back and forth, we came to the conclusion that it was probably some people who has been here during nighttime who did it. We began from scratch and started digging again. It was clear to see that the dirt we dug up was the same dirt from yesterday. It was easy to notice the difference between dirt which has been underneath the ground for many years, compared to dirt that has been dug up, and then replaced again within a few days. But one thing in particular was extremely weird. And I had this thought, but Dave was the first to point it out. The fresh dirt we dug up today was way more than how deep we managed to dig yesterday. The hole was deeper than we remembered. The hole was indeed deeper than we dug it the day before, and it looked like someone had been trying to fill it back up. Dave and I exchanged nervous glances. Who would do something like that? We decided to dig it up. As we dug deeper, the earth beneath our shovels grew colder and denser. I'm telling you, it felt like we were digging our own graves. And then, Dave's shovel struck something hard. We both froze, our eyes locking onto each other's in terror. Carefully, we cleared away the dirt, revealing a person. A man, to be precise. He was dressed in a tattered suit, his skin pale as death, and his eyes wide open, as if he'd seen something that had terrified him beyond words. His body was contorted in an unnatural pose. Dave and I stumbled back, our hearts pounding in our chests. We couldn't believe what we were seeing. I even managed to throw up. There, in the hole we'd been digging, was a body that didn't belong there. Someone had buried this man secretly in the cemetery. We called the police and they came to investigate. They couldn't make heads or tails of it either. It was like the corpse had just appeared overnight and no one knew how it got there. It was chilling, to say the least. The authorities eventually identified the deceased man, but the mystery of how he ended up in that grave remained unsolved.